When the Nate Diaz and Khamzat Chimaev UFC fight was announced, Nate Diaz dead started trending, with fans claiming that Diaz had signed his death sentence with this match. You could tell that the internet's reaction was pretty dramatic. And where there's drama, there's Jake Paul, who obviously had to give his 2 cents on the entire situation. But what was it that he said that surprised us all? To find out, keep watching. First off, Nate Diaz's struggle to get a fight. It's pretty clear that Nate Diaz has been trying to fight a match for some time now, with him trying to instigate different players such as Vicente Ferguson and Jake Paul, among many others, as well as his ongoing dispute with his contract with UFC. Fans could tell he's desperate to get back into the octagon. In fact, Diaz had accused Dana White, president of the UFC, of holding him hostage. With only 1 fight left in his contract, Diaz claimed that he had been begging White to give him a match, any match, so he could get out of his contract. White has denied these accusations and explained that it's impossible to hold anyone hostage in the company. He went on to explain that if a player doesn't play 3 times a year, he ends up paying them, so he basically has to make them fight. That is his job after all. He said that Diaz would be fighting again soon, but was unable to give a potential date at the time. Since then, things have obviously changed. His match with Khamzat Chimaev was announced on the 20th of July and has been the talk of the sports world since then. But fans seem to think that Diaz stands no chance against Chimaev. Up next, why is the internet so sure Khamzat Chimaev will win? Well, for starters, their track records speak volumes. We were surprised that the fight was set up in the first place because Chimaev is called the golden child of the UFC, while Diaz is the underdog. Talking about track records, Khamzat has been a highlight in the UFC since his debut. Fighting in his first match only 2 years ago, he was able to set a record of 3-0 in about 3 months. Since then, Khamzat has had a perfect professional record of 11-0 and is now the number 3 ranked fighter in the championship. On the other hand, we have Diaz, who has a praiseworthy career starting from 2007, holding a record of 21-13. But that being said, it's important to point out that he's only won 1 fight in the past 6 years. So it makes sense why people are so confident in Chimaev's victory after all. Even though Diaz is a fan favorite, they're concerned that things could get real ugly between the 2 players. But then again, it would be an epic plot twist if Diaz beats all the odds and wins. Jake Paul seems to think so too. Up next, what did Jake Paul tweet that caused such a commotion? The Paul brothers are always in the news for one thing or another, and this time it was Jake's tweet that made headlines. Even though he and Nate were alleged rivals, the problem child surprised fans by showing his support for him. He even poked some fun at Khamzat, calling him a fake Khabib. He tweeted, "Better believe I'm putting my money on Nate Diaz to win versus fake Khabib." His tweet blew up, with fans telling him that he's going to be wasting his money on this one. They started saying things like, "Nate will leave the UFC on a stretcher," or "he actually might just die in the octagon." They seem adamant that Paul is betting his money on the wrong guy. Some fans even commented that Chimaev was nothing like Khabib, and the comparison made no sense. But that's the least of Khamzat's concerns. In fact, like everyone on the internet, he seems pretty confident about this one. And now, Chimaev's response. Sports fanatics are almost positive that the winner of this match will be the golden child of the UFC, Khamzat Chimaev. He already has a winning streak running, and if everyone's predictions are true, this will be just the cherry on top of his career. With all the popularity this match is already receiving, even though it has only verbally been confirmed by the 2 fighters, it's likely that if he wins, this will be a turning point for his career. The win could most likely set him up with a match with Kamaru Usman, who is the current welterweight king. So you might be wondering if Khamzat had anything to say about the entire thing. Talking to the ESPN reporter Brett Okamoto, he said that he's going to handle Nate Diaz's funeral with the UFC. This just gave people more content to make memes and posts out of. The most famous one out of all of them was one made by Boris, which was an image of him at a funeral praying over a gravestone. The gravestone read, "Nate Diaz, 2004 to 2022. Pretty gruesome stuff. And finally, some fans express some hope for Diaz. Even though the internet hasn't been the most supportive of Diaz, not all hope is lost. In fact, some of his loyal followers are still rooting for him, despite the fact that some of them want for him to win out of spite, just to prove the majority of the internet wrong. But at this point, we're pretty sure any kind of support could be great for Nate. Either way, we're all hoping Nate doesn't exit the octagon on a stretcher, that's for sure. The match will be fought on the 10th of September, and we're sure you're all as eager as us to see who will win. Now, in other related news. First up, Jake Paul reveals his long-term goal of becoming boxing's light heavyweight champion. Jake Paul has had an interesting career from the beginning, with him transitioning from being famous on Vine to becoming an actor on Disney, then a YouTuber, and now he's finally ended up becoming a professional boxer. Since he's made so many changes in his career, people always assumed that this was just another phase for him, and eventually we'd be hearing the news that once again he's dived into a new one. But it looks like Paul has finally decided what he wants to do in life. In fact, Paul is dreaming big and claims that he wants to be a heavyweight champion. In an interview with ESPN, he said that he wants to make it big in the next 3 to 4 years and wants to fight with the big names in the sports industry. In his interview, he talked about how he was aware that there were people praying for his downfall, but he's fully committed to achieving his goal. Although Jake isn't the most liked personality on the internet, he has made his name in the sports world with a decent record of having 5 wins and no losses so far. We wouldn't be surprised to see him make his dream come true. Next, UFC's Dana White calls Jake Paul pay-per-view turd. Not everyone is a big fan of Jake Paul, and UFC President Dana White is one of them. In an interview at Madison Square Garden, he was questioned about Jake Paul and Hasim Rahman Jr.'s boxing match, which Paul had won. White had nothing but nice things to say about this. He replied that Paul is a pay-per-view turd and the match is old news. Yikes. But this animosity doesn't really come as a surprise, since Paul has always been vocal about how White runs the UFC inefficiently. He has complained multiple times that White doesn't provide health insurance for the fighters and also raised the concern that they aren't paid on time. White has since denied these claims, but it's clear that he still holds a grudge. And who would blame him? It's hard to be a fan of someone who's made a diss track about you, and that track has 4 million views on YouTube. We've got to admit, it's kind of hard to let that one pass. And for our final news, Jake Paul's next opponent threatens to slap Dana White. Looks like Dana White isn't much liked by other players either. In fact, Jake Paul's next match opponent, Hasim Rahman Jr., has threatened to slap White. Double yikes. Son of former heavyweight world champion Hasim Rahman Sr., Hasim Rahman Jr. had a lot to say to Dana White. He appeared on the Days in Boxing show, where he claimed that White knows that Rahman Jr. is a force to be reckoned with. According to him, White knows that any fighter would lose against Rahman because he's that good of a player. He could have just ended that conversation there, but Rahman went ahead further and talked about White's criticism of him. It's clear that he did not appreciate it, as he threatened to slap White if he ever ran his mouth like that ever again. How about we leave the fighting just with the fighters, Rahman, and not start beefing with the chairman of the UFC? Just a thought. That's a wrap for this video. Do you think Jake Paul is making the right decision to bet his money on Nate Diaz? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. See you in the next one.